Hey, what's up everybody? Rob Marzullo here, Ram Studio Comics. Welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to do a little bit more on some rendering techniques. So I had a few requests on this, and actually I forgot to do it a while ago. I've got other videos obviously on the channel about it, but then I thought I probably need to do an updated one. So I was working on a little piece here of, if you can't tell, it's the Joker from The Batman. And what I did here is just put a screen overlay layer. And I'll actually even just show you real quick how rough something like this starts out, even though it's not really totally refined yet. These are the stages of it right here. So I start off with something as basic and as rough as that. Refine it up a little bit to something like that, which there's a few soft erases in there, and then get it to about this. And I think I did a few more touch-ups to there, maybe not. But anyways, the point of this one is going to be to show you how I might render a few different materials. So you've got the suit of the character, you've got the hair of the character, the facial features, and how you might just try to make each one look a little bit different. Even the glove that he wears, I tried to make it look a little bit more smooth and less shaded. So I want to explain a little bit of that. So let's go ahead and jump on in. So I'm not going to get too much into the brushes. I just use a standard pencil that comes with Sketchbook Pro. I modified the brush for inking, but this isn't going to be an inking video, so we won't worry too much about that. Alright, so at any rate, what I try to think about is a few different things. One, first and foremost, or I guess not foremost, but something I always tend to do first, is line weight. So I get in there and I make sure to try to vary up the line and just get some feel and some movement to the line. So I don't want this line to be like this. That's very boring and basic, and your artwork's just not going to really jump off the page that way. So what you do is get some thick to thins in there, some areas that are pretty heavy. Mainly the rule is areas that tend to be more in shadow, or if the material is supposed to look like it's lifting up off the page, or thicker than a corresponding material. I always think of it like this, that everything that you do when drawing this stuff is in comparison to other aspects of the drawing. So for instance, if I want, something to look thin and smooth, or probably just thin in comparison to another material, I may give it a thinner line just because I'm trying to show that contrast. So that's one thing to think about. The other is that, the various shapes that you use with your shadows will convey certain things. So with cloth, one of the things that you see a lot are these rounded shapes like this. So you're not going to get that by me just showing you. You're gonna start understanding that more and more by drawing lots and lots of pictures of clothing and different cloth-like materials. There's just a lot of advanced things that happens in cloth, like it'll rotate back and kind of sweep and curve, and then maybe come back and do it again. And I'm not the greatest at it, so I'm not going to try to explain that other than do lots and lots of studies of it, and it'll start to make sense over time. So what you try to do here is show the separation of shadow in the material to get like some weight of the folds. And if it's a thicker material, like he's wearing a jacket here of some kind, I don't know what type you'd call it, just a suit or whatever. Generally, those materials are pretty thick. I mean, they obviously have got different materials of everything, but to show that, you want to show larger folds. So larger folds are going to be resemblant of a thicker material, and thinner, more folds in succession, I should say, are going to be resemblant of maybe a thinner material. So that's just stuff, again, you have to study, and don't feel bad if you're not getting it right. Just look at some pictures, pull from reference, and do it that way. So what I'll generally do first is get some of this stuff in there. And this is like more the finished pencil stage before I'd go to ink. I could ink actually what you see right here, but I wouldn't if I want it to be, really nice. If I'm really trying to make a piece look really finished, I might just add one more layer of pencils like you see me doing here. And I really don't have to be filling this in. I could just draw the little X's there. I'm doing that more for your benefit than anything at this stage. So I'd fill it in or I just do the little X's to speed it up. And then as far as cross hatching and rendering goes, It's not so particular to the material, I would say. But it's more what you're looking for is to make sure that it looks different than the other materials. So again, when I talk about working in contrasting elements on the page, that's more or less what I think about when I'm doing this part. So the only thing that I'm focusing on when I do this is that I want some sort of gradation or fade to happen. I don't want just this abrupt line like this, or rounded shape there. To me, that's just too boring, and that's not going to convey what I'm looking for. So that's where I get into drawing in those render lines. So again, let me just fill this in, just because it's to me it's easier to illustrate what I'm talking about if this is dark versus just showing you those little X's for inking. All right, so I want these heavier tapered lines here, feathered lines I call them, like this. You see I'm kind of hitting each line a couple times. You can get good at just doing it with one pull. I don't work that way with this particular setup. By the way, just so you know what I'm working on, currently I'm using a Cintiq to do this, and this is obviously Sketchbook Pro. So even here I do like this little bit of a solid, and on each side I break it up with just a few little lines, mainly because I just think it looks more interesting to have those lines off to the side, and because it gives me a gradation. So those are the two factors that I think about when trying to illustrate or render some of these lines. And the other thing that I try to do more and more of as of late is not bring so much stuff to a point. I noticed that a lot in my previous work, and even now I kind of fight the urge. It's real easy to go like this and leave points everywhere. In some areas that's fine, but again, in the idea of focusing on contrast and having a nice variety to your work, you want to make sure that you don't do that on every type of line work that you do. Some lines you want to purposely round off, like say right here, instead of all these points, maybe round a few of those off and have some more rounded than others, and instead of a bunch of straight lines, maybe put a nice little wave in there, because that's what materials, fabric's going to do. Things that are more organic are going to do that. They're not all just going to go straight line, straight line, straight line, or all, and equally not all just be, curves like this. Everything's, you got to have a nice variety in the work to make it look, not real. I mean, we're not going for realism here, but just, I don't know, properly stylized or something. Okay, so let's get some more of this filled in. I'll do a little bit more of this cross hatching. And what I'll probably do is do a little bit of each of the areas, and then maybe I'll time lapse the end just so that you do get to see how I would bring this next level of finish to the rest of the pencils. But I want to explain a good amount of the cross hatching, because I think a lot of people struggle with this area of the artwork. So again, I'm tapering these lines. I don't have to I don't have to taper every single line, but right here I'm just kind of going with what I've already put down, and then I might do a little bit of cross hatching. Generally when I cross hatch, I'll use maybe a little bit thinner line, just so it has a little bit more variance to it. And then here maybe I'll do like a line going with the little bulk of the shadow there, and then maybe these other little lines going that way. I kind of don't like that little fat one I put there, even though it's not that big of a deal. And you got to remember too that if you're still going to ink this, or you've got a inker that's pretty much on the same page as you guys have worked together before, then they're going to know what to do with this. It's not a big deal. You don't have to entirely spell it out for them. That's why that other, the previous layer of this is fine if you're going to ink it, or if it's somebody you've worked with quite a bit. Now, if it's somebody that you're new to working with and you're afraid of, I don't know, maybe giving them too much reign over your vision or whatever, then maybe you could spell it out a little bit more. But keep in mind that it is nice to let an inker just really go to town with it too, and see what they come up with, because they're great artists too. So it's kind of nice to give them that free reign and see what they get. So let's see. So here I might, again, I'm throwing in these shadows, and you can see I almost instinctively go to that point every time, and I gotta kind of fix it. I do want a little bit of a point here, because I kind of do this lightning bolt thing for the change in direction of the fold there. And then here I'll try to do a little bit different line, just so I'm not tapering every single line. Rotate this back, maybe a few taper lines here. And these are all just style choices. I mean, really the only thing that these lines represent, like I said before, are kind of a gradation, you know, so shading, you know, and then past that, the way that you do your cross hatching or stippling or whatever it is your style choice. And then, you know, another good thing to do while you're doing this too is especially digitally, because it's so easy to get caught up really close, is pan back and make sure that it's even working properly, that it still makes sense as folds in the material. So what I'll do is I'll shade down into here more right now, because it's looking a bit, I always look at areas that bother me the most. Right now this area bothers me the most, but it might be again in contrast because this area doesn't have enough shading. I want it to look like, pretty much, if I was to do it really fast, that this area is shaded down in a way like that more. But I think that really it's just not making sense because these shapes are a little funny to one another, but we'll see. And we shade a little bit more down here. So again, I'll taper some of these lines. Another good rule when doing this type of shading or cross hatching is that you have the lines taper or go with the direction of the material. So what that does for you, or what it does for the, I guess, the person viewing the work, is it really illustrates for them, you know, where your intentions are for the roundedness of the form. So that's really why you do it. It's, you know, it's not entirely a rule or anything like that, because I've definitely seen people that do nice work that don't abide by that at all. But if you're having a tough time conveying rounded forms, one way that you can reinforce that is to make your line work go with the direction of the material that you're trying to illustrate. So for instance, right here, I'm trying to make it look like these are little folds in the material. For instance, I would want this one here to look recessed behind here. Okay, so to do that, I put these little lines here. They can be whatever type of lines, but now I've just pushed that material back, and I don't want to totally cover this white area here because I want it to look higher than this area, but I still want it to look rounded. So I'll put these tiny little, I don't know what you want to call them, teeth or something, but just little lines like that. So I still illustrate the fact that this might be rounded, but I've reinforced that this part here is lower in height or whatever, because I've shaded it down. So just want to really illustrate that, because I think that, you know, a lot of times people ask questions about this type of shading, and, you know, advanced artists, not calling myself advanced by any means, but advanced artists will just kind of go, hey, check this out, you know, and see what I can do. But that doesn't explain to, you know, the newer artists exactly what they're thinking, what the thought process is. And there really is a thought process to every part of this. It's just we get so caught up in doing that we don't feel, you know, we don't think so much about explaining, I guess. So there's a little bit more cross hatching. Again, I'm trying to, if I want to drop all this white area back a little bit, I could just take a series of little thin lines. They don't all have to be the same weight, and I can just throw those in there real quick. And, you know, the beauty of digital is if I really wanted to test this, I could just add a layer. But I think that helps a little bit. I think it knocks this area back a little bit further like I wanted. And maybe some little breaks right here, because this, again, this area right here is still bothering me. But that's good enough for now. And then maybe a couple little lines like that. So the other part that I want to get to, because these videos tend to run really long, I want to say they run really long really quickly, which totally contradicts itself. But what I'm saying is, like, it seems like I'm flying through these, and I look at the clock and go, man, that's a 20-minute video. What the heck happened? So I want to try to make sure I touch on a few topics here, because I know the longer videos, the attention span, or the attention rating, or whatever you want to call it, really fades off on them. So it's like, people watch the first 5 minutes and like, man, this is one long-winded video. This guy won't shut up. I'm out of here. So yeah. So anyways, so this right here, I'm shading this down a bit more. Again, I could probably just get away with the little X's here, down there. And so I repeat this process. So say I get this material right here looking the way that I want, and I think that's pretty accurate. I mean, I'm sure it's not perfect in everybody's mindset, but it looks good enough for me for conveying fabric, this rounded material. So that's how I would do that part. But that's only one part of the illustration. Now, it's not a very advanced illustration. There's only the jacket, the glove, the facial, and the hair. But I have to make sure that I don't do the same rendition everywhere, or it's just not going to look as cool. It's not going to look as well thought out. So, for instance, I'll go to the hair up here. Hair is obviously entirely different looking of a material and a shading. So what I first do with hair is I try to get in these sweeping, flowing lines like this. So I'll start with those, and this is how I worked up to this. So I started with these, kind of ribbony lines, but also the main thing when I'm doing this is I'm not thinking about each strand of hair. I'm thinking about the bulk of the hair. So a lot of times I'll even draw either the silhouette first or the hairline or whatever, but just thinking about it in the larger shapes, so that I'll go, okay, maybe there's a bulk of hair that goes like this and it turns a bit, and I'll skip a big area. And I think that's the trickiest part to get the hang of, because we immediately want to get in there and start drawing these little strands of hair. That's the worst thing to do. So skip some areas purposely. You can come back to them, and basically it's kind of like painting. In painting, you work from large to small, and it's tough at first to get your mind to think that way. But then after you do, you fly through paintings. It's actually a really neat process. If you watch the channel, you know I like to digitally paint as well. So that I think of hair almost the same way. That I do the larger shapes. Thinking more about the direction and the flow and that kind of thing. And and you can what was I going to say? You can skip areas, but I already mentioned that. But you basically just try to get these little flips in there. So see, I'm trying to curl the ends and whatever. It's already illustrated, so it's easy now. But I'm showing you what I did to get here. And then past that, you start to shade it, but then you have to still remember that when you shade it, because it's real easy to get in here now and go, well, I'm just going to shade the entire thing like this. Right? And that's going to look pretty boring if you just have, you can make that work too, but what I like to do is I'll usually fade off the ends to dark, especially if it's a darker hairstyle, and I'll get in these larger chunks, and you can pretty much use a larger pen as well. I'll do a little bit of separation so I don't, again, block it all in at once, but I just kind of do this thing where I do like thick to thin, but larger pieces. Again, staying away from the idea of going, I'm going to draw these little hairs everywhere. That's like the part you do right at the very end. At least the way that I do it is. So that, you get this, again, working large to small. So block in these larger areas, a little bit of separation, remembering to contradict some of the flow, because if you do all of the hair the exact same way, then it's going to look boring. It's not going to look realistic. And again, you get all this from studying real hair, but then trying to recreate it in a stylized or caricature type way. This is again the way that I kind of study it and think about it. So again, I'm getting in these bulkier shadows. I've got my underlying drawing to really guide me at this point. And I think I did like 3 sketch layers to get to what you see here. Again, I try to, go back and forth with the curvature of the lines a bit so it doesn't all the hair doesn't point in the same direction. And this too, like say right here, this hair looks like it flips up, right? And here's we'll say the bulk of this strand of hair or whatever is right about through here, okay? So another thing you can do is have the other hair look like it's coming from behind that bulk or series of strands or whatever, and coming up and around like this. Maybe there's a shadow right there. So again, you're thinking about it like this. If you were to draw it off to the side, here's this strand of hair. This one's kind of pointing like this. I want this other one to look like it's coming from a different direction, like behind it. So maybe it'd be shaded back here and come around like this. And you just kind of repeat that entire process over and over and rotate and flip, and that's how you get excuse that bad sketch, but hopefully you're getting the idea. And that's how you get the flowingness of the hair. But again, just think about working big to small, and that should help you out there. Okay, so the other thing I do with hair, as far as the rendering side, because that's really what this video is about, is more the rendering of it, is I'll get in the bulk of the shadows like you see here, and I do a lot of tapered lines. I'll start with some thick to thin lines on the very edges, like this. And then I'll do a little bit of separation in some of the lines. So to me, this is kind of illustrating, like, you know, the strands of the hair a bit more. So by doing these little tapered lines, you're kind of saying, you know, this is where the shadow breaks off and you see a little bit of the strands. And then, let's see, I get to a part like right here. So this part, I'm picturing that the hair comes up, over, and back down. So the highest point of this is right here. So that's a good thing to keep in mind when you're doing light source. So we'll say that the light, actually I gotta pan back to see where my light source really is, because I forget a lot of times. I guess it could be said that the light source is coming from, you know, this little edge light looks like there's a secondary backlight. But the primary light looks like it's on the front shoulder right there, right? So see how the dark's all, you know, down here and right there. So it could be said that the light is kind of top and to the left of them a bit. So we'll just go with that. So this isn't a perfect illustration to represent correct light source, unfortunately. It's one of my downfalls. So I'll do a shadow under this next bulk of hair from this this larger piece here. So I'll make sure to put a drop shadow kind of right there. I'll say that the light source is hitting right here, so that the tip of the hair here will be darkened in, like this. And I'll say that the light's hitting right about here. Now, for me, the way that I kind of illustrate that is I'll do these little lines, something like this, to where I can just make it look like the hair is not rotating, but there's some curvature there, but then also a little bit of, like, I don't know, glare or shimmer or, you know, whatever. It's got shiny hair. Hopefully you get the point there. So I'll do little things like that for my render lines, you know. And I really just try to repeat that process. You know, it's like, to me, here's, you know, I can get away with just these larger strands, but then at the very end of it, I'll throw in like a couple more, like, little lines in there just for some texture. Like that. And so on and so forth. So that's how I'd render out hair, pretty much, you know. And there's different types of hair, obviously. So depending on the hair that I'm doing on that particular character, I might change that a bit, you know, so that they don't all look the same. Again, with that whole contrasting thing. And I just repeat this process, and I try to remember where my light source is. Now, the other thing, if you're like me and you suffer from remembering where your light source is in the shot, just remember that it's easy enough to just you know, put these little notes, you know, draw little arrows or whatever, and put them right by where you're working and erase it later, so that you just remember, you know, exactly where your light source is. Okay, so what else can I illustrate here? Now, the only other part, I mean, so hopefully you can see now that there's definitely a difference in the way that I rendered the hair to the jacket. And let me see if I can do a little bit of variation in the face. So, and then we'll, you know, time lapse the rest, so if you want to see the finished artwork or whatever. So again, I start with the line weight here, get some nice heavy, you or some variation, maybe a thick line here on the bottom of the brow. Pretty thick line for the cheek because that's like his signature look, but then I'll make sure to do a nice heavier line at the base of the cheek right there. Let's see, so now bend this line back inward. And the other thing I want to make mention of is make sure to really practice doing different things with your shapes. I know that's pretty rudimentary and kind of goes without saying, but I think we get in the habit of drawing the same shape. So we think that we get good at drawing a chin, for instance, and we say, okay, this is how a chin looks, and then we draw that chin the same way every time. That's why I really recommend drawing caricatures and practicing drawing that chin or that nose a lot of different ways. And I just think you'll be happy that you did, because it kind of breaks that monotonous thing that we do as artists, and we kind of just go for the same thing each time. And to really get a nice variety of characters, you want to try a lot of different shapes and the facial features even, and the characters that you create. So just give that a go. All right, so now I'm going to start doing a little bit of the line work as I go here, and I just want to make sure that it looks a little bit smoother than the jacket material, but then I still want to add lots of cool cross hatching and try to make the character look a bit gritty or whatever, which actually this one doesn't look very gritty. It looks more like fun and caricature or something, I would say, but it's the Joker, and I want to make sure he's got like some a little bit of like eeriness to him, hopefully, because it's this kind of the character's style anymore. This almost looks like the old school Joker, where he's more like animated and cartoony. So I just want to get some of my shapes of shadows in there, some of my base direction. And so when I get in here to shade, I want to try to make sure to use a little bit more cleaner effect, or maybe smaller, tighter lines, or just anything really to make it look like a different material than the hair, and also a different material than the jacket. And to me, that helps just illustrate that one surface material is different than another. So I'm just kind of wondering as I'm doing this, like where I really want these lines. So if you notice, I'm trying to keep those a lot tighter, so that if you pan back, you can see these lines are a lot bigger and more pronounced, I guess, than the tighter lines in the face. But I still want to get some ample shading and effects in the face as well. Keep it in mind too, if you're doing like a female character, you almost want to do none of these lines on the face. You can do a little bit of it, but just study a lot of your favorite comic book people, and you'll notice that for females there's just a lot less line work and a lot more hinting of shapes with shadows. So just things like that, or hardly any shadows on the face as well on a female character, unless it's like a kind of dark, ominous setting or book or whatever. That's another thing. If you want to make your character look more eerie, gruesome, whatever, just add more lines. Equally as well as if you want to add age to the character, add a lot more line work. So it's the Joker. I kind of want, a little bit of creepy craziness to him. So I'm going to make sure to keep kind of dropping in little shadows here and there just to kind of enforce that. So like I say, he looks a little too friendly, or, well, he's going to look friendly. It's a Joker, but he doesn't have that spooky eeriness that the Joker should have, I think. So I'll get some of these shadows in here, some of these rounded organic shapes for the ear. So again, thick line, maybe a little bit heavier there, thin it out, a little bit heavier there. And that's really all I do for line weight. I don't know that I really think too much about it, other than I know I like the look of a lot of variation as I do it. Some little line breaks here. Okay, so let's try the eyes, because the eyes, I mean, every little part you want to give a little bit different feel, but I think I can illustrate that in the eyes here. So let me try that. So obviously with the eyes, I want this effect that they look, a bit glossy. So that's why I got that big glare off to one side. I also want the effect that they look rounded. It's real overly easy to make eyes look flat, especially in the beginning of drawing this stuff. So ways to kind of combat that are shadows on the insides like this, on both sides. Also, like you're kind of looking a little bit up at the character, so you could draw a little bit of that top eyelid that you see. So you can do that by doing a line that goes across and then blends back in. And what that generally will illustrate is that you're just seeing a little bit upward into the eye. You could raise the eyelid up, like this a bit. Hope I get it right. So that adds just a little bit of dimension to the eye. So you can see this side looks a little bit more dimensional than the other side. And then as far as the eye itself, like this, the iris. Let's see, get the pupil in there. I can never get it perfectly round. And then, you do this glare line, so it starts making the eye look a bit more glossy. And then I added this little bit of shadowing. Generally, you're going to get this more on the top of the eye, but I kind of just wanted to push the roundedness a bit more from this angle, and I felt like it looked better at the bottom. But you can generally get this on the top too. And then, you can get in here and do some of your little line work to round out the eye this way. And then again, to kind of push the eeriness a bit, I'll start doing a little bit of shading around the eye itself. So a little bit of this tapering line stuff. And you can see that some of this isn't already in there. Most of it is, because it was already a relatively tight drawing. But just don't be afraid to add things in and change things randomly. It's always the way that you're going to learn with this stuff, and it's also the way that you're going to come up with your best ideas at times. And is by just randomly making decisions and putting it in there, and not being afraid of those changes. So really get in there, make the changes, have fun with it, and you'll be pleasantly surprised sometimes. And that's how you'll come up with new things in your style, within your style. So here I might do I didn't want a really heavy shadow, but I think I'm going to add it. So I'll add that in right here. Again, I just want to push the effect, and to me, by adding the shadow here, it's going to make the eye look more bulged out, which is what I'm after. So I'll fill this all in, darken in the eyebrow. Something I like to do with eyebrows now is I'll fill the whole thing in, and then I'll just come back. If I want to see any of the little line separation for the hairs, I'll just fill it in with white at the very end. Just a bit easier when you're working digitally. And you can do this traditionally as well with they got those white paint pens and things, or a brush with white ink is pretty effective as well. So I want to give them these really crazy eyebrows. And let's see, a little bit more shading right here. And again, I'm going to keep these lines really small and feathered. And if you notice, I'm not even doing any cross-hatching right there. Just a choice. I mean, again, there's no right or wrong way to do this stuff. And then I'll pan back to kind of check the work. But any ways that I can make sure that the face is shaded differently than the hair and the shoulder here. Okay, so hopefully that's giving you enough ideas of how I would render stuff like this and what choices I would make as I go through it. Even things like this where I want a shadow under the neck and I want it to look a bit different than other areas. So I'll fill it in pretty heavily on the sides like this. And I can add a layer just to kind of get these lines right. And then I'll taper these lines, but I'll make sure to make them really tight to one another. So the more that you can incorporate different styles of line work, the more that your work's going to be, I would say, impressive as you create it, because it won't look like you just did the same thought process of the same line work over the entirety of your piece. So as simple as even that shadow under the neck, just a little bit different look than the shoulder, the hair, the face. So I'll go ahead and time lapse this next part and just finish rendering this so the video is not too entirely long. So as always, I appreciate you watching and hopefully you enjoyed this video. Make sure to share it if you did like it, and make sure to check out my Gumroad page for other video tutorials and brushes and other digital content. So thanks very much for watching. Keep drawing, keep having fun, and I will talk to you soon.